of the week, Thursday, October 3rd, 2019. Dave Lochran, Sal Vetri. Game by game, baby. Here it is. The week 5 is approaching rapidly. Season always goes so quickly, though, Sal. But here we are coming up on week 5, 12-game main slate. And we're here to break it down, man. See if we can bang it out in an hour 15, hour 20. We'll try.
Yeah, hour 15. That sounds great. Yeah, fifth week. We're seasoned at this now, so I'm excited. I feel like at this point in the week is probably the best I felt about a week so far. So hopefully that translates. But more extra time really just to look into some things and tie up loose ends in terms of just some model stuff. So yeah, I feel good. Excited to break this thing down and see what we can do about it.
Generally speaking, the better I feel about a slate, the worse I do. Let's hope that changes this week.
False expectation.
Let's hope. NFL strategy shows presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, home of the $350,000 baller, $35,000 to first, $10 to enter. I also got no management fee contest where every bit of money that you pay into the contest gets paid back out to you, the player. And you can get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points. Get those YSRPs simply by signing up through us at awesomeo.com. Go to the MLB tab. We will change this, but go to the MLB tab, click on Spotlight Hitters. It's totally free. Upon doing so, you'll see the link at the top of the article. Click on that, sign up, and use the code AWESOMO if they give you an option for that. Get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points upon depositing. Hopefully, Brett, our social media guy, will drop a link in the YouTube chat as well if that is easier for you. But yeah, go ahead and check him out. It's a great spot for daily fantasy football specifically. And if you're working with a smaller bankroll too, they got the free roll that's paying out really good money, and $4,000 to first in the $1 25K guaranteed NFL contest, which is also really cool. So go ahead, check it out, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. Sign up through us, the MLB Spotlight Hitters article, or hopefully we'll drop a link right now into the YouTube chat and get your $30 in Yahoo Sports Rewards points upon depositing, and we will see you over there. All right, Sal, we're going game by game, man. And as I always say, before we do, let's get any pertinent news out of the way. Any relative or relevant developments on the injury front or on the coach speak front since you and I last spoke on Tuesday afternoon?
Yeah, I think there's a good amount. I mean, the most recent was today with Pat Shurmur saying that there's still a chance, Saquon, and a real chance that he's going to play this Sunday.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, I can't see that, especially just obviously we know how good this guy is. So I think it's mainly just smoke if they're trying to kind of throw a defense off. But I mean, this is a high ankle sprain that he's been gone for 2 weeks from, and the most positive expectations were 4 weeks for him to come back. So seems crazy. I mean, the guy is a freak, but I don't expect that to kind of lead.
By the way, I don't mean it's crazy like it won't happen, because I have no idea how quickly he heals. I mean, in the event that he does come back, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he was running yesterday at practice is crazy.
Yeah, no question.
And I'm sure they're, albeit whatever you want to say about the Giants franchise, I'm sure they're pretty privy to the fact that if there's any risk, he's not going to be playing. So this is very positive news, especially if he doesn't play this week, for next week, which is very much ahead of the timeline of at least 4 to 6 weeks from what a lot of people were saying early on. I would say that the Cardinals, their situation right now at wide receiver seems to be changing by like every 6 hours or so, but they did sign Farrell Cooper, who seems like he's going to be filling in for the slot for Kirk. We were kind of trying to figure out who would go into the slot. And while we were looking into it, there's really no slot receiver outside of Christian Kirk and Larry Fitzgerald on the team. So Cooper, who played slot for them in the preseason, he was on the Bengals actually 2 weeks ago. So gets a little revenge spot, but it seems like he'll be lining up in the slot. We'll see how much of 4 wide receiver sets they'll run as usual. But it seems like he'll be in the slot on a lot of them. I'd expect some David Johnson there, Larry Fitz, and then on the outside, it seems like a Trent Sherfield and Keyshawn Johnson type game. So Andy Isabella, they said he'll play on the outside, but we kind of already knew that. It's just a matter of how much, and it doesn't seem like a ton.
Yeah, and we'll get into that game more once we arrive at it. There's a lot to talk about there for sure.
Yeah.
Chris Spags and I broke it down at length even more yesterday, and Sal and I really kind of introduced it to the week in on Tuesday's show, where we took a first look at salaries and everything relevant from week 4 that we can translate into positive results for week 5. Check all of that out, youtube.com/awesomeo. If you missed those shows, go back and watch them. I truly believe throughout the week, we're providing some of the most important and informative information out there to get you ready throughout the week, and not just ramming it all down your throat on one day, trying to set it up day by day right here on the NFL Strategy Show. That is the purpose of it. And I think we've done a pretty good job of delivering the goods. You ready to get started, Sal?
Yeah, let's do it, man.
All right. Carolina, Jacksonville. Kyle Allen, very solid debut. Unsurprisingly fell off a cliff the following week against, at least respectable Houston defense. Now he's got the Jacksonville Jaguars. We can get into the numbers there. I know you've got them queued up, but you have a 41-point over-under, one of the lowest on the slate. And the Panthers at home are 3.5-point favorites. But as we stand right now, the only games with a lower over-under are Buffalo, Tennessee, and Chicago, Oakland. So it's worth keeping that in mind as we explore this game.
Yeah, so I'll start on the Carolina side. Obviously, just the role for Christian McCaffrey keeps him in play on a week where there's a lot of options up there at running back. Definitely somebody I'm looking at. I mean, he's now number one in carries, averaging 21.5 a week. He has 29 targets on the year. So this role is just fantastic. I mean, touching 29 opportunities a week, having 37 touches last week. Everybody knows how good of a play he is. If you can get to him, I don't think it's terrible. We'll talk about throughout the show kind of where he ranks relative to other backs that are expensive this week, but he's fine. There's nothing bad to say about Christian McCaffrey. For the rest of Carolina, I'm a little bit timid to touch the rest of this team, really, especially the receivers. So Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore in the 2 weeks now with Kyle Allen, they both ranked outside the top 50 in air yards, just not forcing the ball down the field. And I mean, when you're dumping it off 10 times a game to McCaffrey and he's getting big chunks, it makes some sense. So they haven't really had to force the ball downfield either. So that's part of it in a 2-game sample. But on a slate with 12 other games or 11 other games, 23 other teams, I'm just not going to probably be getting there. Greg Olsen kind of just falls into a very mess portion of the tight end pool for me. So it really from Carolina, it's just Christian McCaffrey for the most part. I think there's interesting spots on the other side of this game. But where do you stand on Carolina? Because I think right now it really just Christian McCaffrey is rising to the top for obvious reasons.
Yeah, for very obvious reasons. Outside of that, though, I'm really not enamored with this spot. Jacksonville as a team defensively, they're really. Here's how I see it. Them and Denver, I thought was a really interesting game last week because, these are two teams defensively that you would expect to be really, really good. It isn't to say that they've been terrible, but they certainly haven't been juggernaut defenses. So I'm not afraid to target certain spots on these teams if I think it's right. Now, what do you know about Jalen Ramsey?
Yeah, so this is just an interesting situation. The guy doesn't play last week, flying home for the birth of his child, whatever it might be. So, I mean, the latest that has come out is they don't want to trade him. He's staying on the Jaguars. So we haven't heard kind of what he's expecting to be doing so far this weekend. I would say expectations are that he plays right now, but we haven't had a report on is Jalen Ramsey going to suit up or not. I mean, he's fully healthy. It's just a matter of does he want to be on this team? And it seemed like last week, whether they were solid, I guess, excuses or not, he didn't end up suiting up for that game. So we'll see what this week now is sort of a fresh slate, but nothing has really come out from his side or his camp on if he's playing or not. I would say I would expect him to, otherwise this gets really messy really quick. But yeah, if he's out, then I think that helps probably Curtis Samuel the most. AJ Boye, Sammy Watkins just went nuclear week 1, has been very solid the last 2 or 3 weeks. He would slide in as the number 1 cornerback if Ramsey was to miss again. And from what we've seen the first couple of weeks, that guy usually gets DJ Moore. So it would be beneficial for Samuel.
Yeah, I agree with that. Ultimately, here's where I stand. Christian McCaffrey, clearly the player I like most. Football Outsiders has Jacksonville's run defense, believe it or not, ranked 26 in the league, right down there with Washington and the Giants. In terms of pass defense, they're still very respectable, but I need to know what's going on with Ramsey. I think the biggest thing, though, for me, Sal, is when it comes to this Carolina passing attack, Kyle Allen actually has an A.dot over the last 2 weeks that really isn't terrible when you stack it up against other guys. It's 14th in the league, so right in the middle of the league. The big thing for me is who do I have to sacrifice to prioritize guys like Curtis Samuel and DJ Moore and Olsen? And I think the answer to that is I don't want to prioritize them over other receivers in a similar price range.
Yeah, I think that makes a ton of sense. I mean, they're there in like the mid 4K range for Samuel, where it seems like he just can't escape all year. But yeah, there's other options down there that I think you have just more stable quarterback play and overall like a better total pace up and all that as well.
What about the other side? Leonard Fournette coming off a very impressive game, 200 plus rushing yards. He's still, though, yet to score a touchdown on the season, which is pretty wild. One fumble, 0 touchdowns, but 225 yards last week. Another thing, too, he has been pretty involved in the passing game, right? That should be encouraging to anybody who, is targeting Leonard Fournette or hell has him in seasonal leagues. 23 targets through his first 4 games. You'll take that all day long, averaging just shy of 6 per game, especially given the fact that his carry totals have been, I think they'll only continue to climb if it's a positive game script or at least neutral. If they fall behind, he'll still be involved in the passing game. So both of those factors, to me, definitely play a big role. Carolina's run defense, again, believe it or not, it's the pass defense that has been so good. 6th in the league, 27th in run defense DVOA, according to Football Outsiders. So I'll throw it to you, Sal. I think the biggest thing when it comes down to Leonard Fournette every week is, will he be on the field? The answer is yes, he will be on the field a lot, which always makes him relevant because opportunity and volume trump efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. The last piece you said, opportunity volume trump efficiency is huge. So this guy, his volume has just been insane. We saw him finally have a good and really fantastic game last week. He's top 3 in routes run for running backs with 118. He has 13 more than Kamara to kind of put that in perspective right now. And he's top 5 in targets as well. So what he's averaging right now per week is 18 carries and right around 6 targets. That's just elite usage for a guy, like you said, hasn't scored a touchdown yet. And you would expect that at the end of the year, this guy is going to have 5+ touchdowns at probably a lower end. So they're going to be coming in bulk, which you would imagine over a short amount of time now that he hasn't scored through a quarter of the season. So keeping in mind that Carolina put Cowan short on injury reserve. He hasn't been playing for a few weeks now. That's a big cog on that defensive line that's not going to be there. Helps Fournette, helps their offensive line a little bit. So, yeah, I found just an interesting thing was all 29 of his carries last week were to the left side of the field or the middle, nothing to the right side. Yeah, all 29. So there's one where he runs up the middle and he gets tackled like maybe on the right hash mark, but nothing directed to the right side. So I want to look more into that and see if there's anything that there's a reason why if they're running behind better offensive lines that makes sense. But yeah, the usage is there. The price tag's really nice. I think what's interesting is you have some cheaper running backs we'll probably get into that I think are interesting than all the expensive ones. So it becomes maybe a weird or a different lineup construction to get Leonard Fournette in there at 6,400, but it's a really favorable price point. And he's up there in terms of how much usage he's getting, 24 opportunities a game compared to any of those expensive guys. So yeah, give me Fournette, a guy who coming into last week had less than 5 red zone carries, and then he picks up 6 red zone carries last week. We like to see more of those inside the 5-yard line, which he didn't have much of, but they're going to come throughout the season.
Yeah, and it could also come down to simply come down to the opponent being worse on that side of the field as well.
Exactly, yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely worth digging more into. Anything else here from Jacksonville?
I think worth noting is that you'll probably have Bradbury shadowing, who seems to be Minshew's favorite target, at least downfield, DJ Shark, which leaves D.D. Westbrook to be a very interesting play for me in tournaments. They've been somewhat struggling against slot receivers. They gave up 7 catches to Kupp week 1. Godwin went for 100+ on a touchdown week 2. And then you had Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk in the slot combined for 15 catches week 3. Last week they had Kenny Stills in the slot, but he ends up getting hurt early, who was in a favorable spot. So D.D. Westbrook, I think, is a very sneaky play for a guy who hasn't been playing well, but probably gets his most favorable matchup of the season so far.
All right, let's get to this next game. Will it be chalky? There's a possibility. Do I really like this game anyway? Yeah, I do. And it's funny because with football, you don't need to be the best player on the field. You just need to have the right price and be in a favorable spot, maybe playing a fast-paced offense. And that's what happens when we get to Arizona and Arizona and the Cincinnati Bengals. Bengals total has come down a little bit. It opened at 26, but it's still at 24.8. Cardinals 21.8, 3-point road dogs, but a 46.5 point over-under, which on the slate is because Kansas City plays a night game and Seahawks Rams are playing tonight. So It's the second highest over under on the main slate, Sal.
Yeah. This game has just so much to it on both sides. It's probably the most notes I have for a game. I think it's really favorable. The ownership is high on some of these players, but if you're going to be stacking in tournaments, or I mean, if you're playing cash, it doesn't matter as much. And then if you're stacking in tournaments, it just kind of equalizes out some of that chalkiness by making you more unique. So I guess we'll start on the Arizona side if you're good with that.
Let's do it, man. And you and I, by the way, uh, I will throw this out there again. You and I broke this down like very comprehensively on Tuesday. So if you're not hearing everything you want to hear from this one, if you want to see like where Keyshawn Johnson's running all of his routes, if you want Sal to break down all of the routes and snap counts and what he expects to happen in the slot, you can check all of that out on Tuesday. But we'll do our best to recap it now. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I'll quickly say the wide receiver situation because it's just gaining a lot of steam right now. Kirk's unlikely to play. Demir Bird unlikely to play. Two guys who are top 4 in the league in routes run. Really, I think both top 3 in the league in routes run from this team. So they're going to be missing. What we saw last week was Trent Sherfield saw the most snaps in place of Demir Bird on the left side, around 84%. I expect that to stay consistent. I expect Larry Fitzgerald to just remain in the slot the whole game. Pharoh Cooper is a guy that they signed in the past week, the Cardinals, and he's a guy who played the slot in the preseason for them. He was on the Bengals and just got waived 2 weeks ago. I expect him to actually get a decent amount of slot snaps here because you have Andy Isabel and then Keyshawn Johnson, the remaining receivers on this team. Keyshawn doesn't leave, like we were saying, one side of the field 90% of the time there. And then Andy Isabel is an outside receiver, and Cliff Kingsbury told us yesterday that he's going to play on the outside, not in the slot. So what that leaves you with is Larry Fitzgerald, David Johnson, who's ran 33 routes out of the slot, and then Pharoh Cooper, who is a slot wide receiver, to play in 4 wide receiver sets. So Pharoh Cooper's not in the DraftKings player pool, but I expect him to play majority of the slot snaps in 4 wide receiver sets. I expect Trent Sherfield to probably be on the left side of the field. Right side of the field is where you'll most likely see Keyshawn Johnson with a little bit of Andy Isabella, Larry Fitz in the slot. So that's kind of how I'm expecting it on Thursday from what we've been told, the transactions to set up. From that, though, I mean, the main interest for me is, sure, there's a lot of moving pieces, lots of value opening up potentially, but it's just Larry Fitzgerald at 6,000 for me. I mean, the guy is probably going to play 100% slot snaps. He's going to see double-digit targets, if not more. Father Time is just – he's in a fantastic crush spot here. And now the fact that the other guy on his team seeing 9+ targets a game is not going to make it in that same position of the slot, you have to imagine that this is just a smash spot for Fitzgerald. So that's where, even though there's a ton of noise on the wide receivers right now, I just kind of stick with the guy that you trust the most in that situation. In Larry Fitzgerald, 94% of the snaps, 13th in air yards, and his red zone role is only going to increase. So that's just the wide receivers there, but that's kind of how I see it shaping up.
I think you covered almost all of it. Solid work, dude. I'm with you in saying that, first of all, Fitzgerald here is really difficult to ignore. When you've got a guy in Kyler Murray that is going to throw, if he doesn't throw 40+ times, I would be shocked in this game. I really would. Even when David Johnson's been effective, he's still more involved in the passing game than he is in the run game, it seems. But here's a couple interesting nuggets for you. On the season, David Johnson has run more routes than any other running back in the league. Now, he's tied with Christian McCaffrey, I should say. But he's ran 127 receiving routes this season and is averaging 1.43 yards per route run, which, given that volume, is ridiculous. You've seen him haul in or rack up 11 targets last week, 9 the week before that, only 1 against Baltimore, but he got injured in that game and left for quite some time, and then 7 against Detroit. I'd love to see the rushing volume settle in around 15 carries per game, but we're still looking at someone in full PPR sites that had 22 total looks last week, half of them in the passing game, 20 in week 3, 9 of them in the passing game. It does make him very, very valuable, especially knowing that he's very capable of breaking off huge chunk plays on the ground or out of the backfield in the passing game. The question is, with price tag, are you willing to get to someone like David Johnson? My answer would be yes. And are you willing to pair him with Kyler Murray if he's going to continue to see upwards of 11 opportunities as a receiver per game?
Yeah, my answer to both of those is yes. So definitely pairing him. I think that is a really good stacking spot, and Murray, Fitzgerald, and David Johnson just make a lot of sense because of the overall usage in the receiving game. And now just the need to probably play him more in the slot if you're going to go 4 wide. Even though you have Cooper there, I imagine you're going to get creative and use David Johnson, who's seen about 8 snaps per week in the slot so far, a little bit more. So, David Johnson right now, if you take that 7,500 or above, his price tag or above, I said on Tuesday that Zeke was probably my most interesting play. Looking into it now, I like David Johnson the most. So not only do you get,
I really like him too.
yeah, I think he's the best play out of those top plays looking into it. So not only do you get the favorable price tag and just a fantastic matchup, Cincinnati bottom 6 on Pro Football Focus and run defense. Cincinnati giving up the most DraftKings points to running backs this year. They were in the top 4 last year in that category. So just no improvement on this defense. Second most receptions, which favors David Johnson in this situation, 31 on the year to running backs from this defense, giving up the most receiving yards, over 80 a week to the running back, and 3 receiving touchdowns in 4 weeks. I mean, these numbers right now, they just can't guard a running back. And also, if you're going to get more usage out of him in the running game, it's all there for him. It's just a matter of, do they actually start running the ball? I mean, Murray's attempting 42 and a half, I believe, attempts per game. David Johnson's only getting stuffed on 10% of his carries, and he's only seeing an 8-man box on less than 5%. I saw 2%, and I had to triple check that. Only 2% of his carries, so very few. He hasn't had a ton of carries for what that's worth because they're throwing so much, but nobody is really worried about stopping him on the ground because they're so focused on the passing game, especially in 4 wide receiver sets. And this defense can't stop him. So not only do you get the favorable price tag, you're going to get some elite usage in the receiving game, and it can only get better on the ground. So yeah, David Johnson, really good spot. And I think correlating him with Murray is completely fine this week.
I don't have an issue with pairing him either. I really like David Johnson. Kind of like you said, throughout the week, I've just grown more fond of David Johnson. You dig deeper into the numbers, and it looks great. Again, I wish I, could look at, 15 carries, at a floor. And I mean in a floor in a neutral game script, not where they're playing from behind 20 points, but in a neutral game script, I would like to see that. But you know what? If he's going to be that involved, I'm okay with it. On the other side of this game, John Ross hits the IR, and he's going to be out for about, they say, at least 6 weeks. I saw a month somewhere else, but seeing the recovery time here, it says 6 to 8 weeks. So differing reports. Either way, he's out. AJ Green should surprise nobody. His recovery time has not exactly gone according to or ahead of schedule, but who would have thought that it would? He will not play this week against the Cardinals. So you've got 2 injuries there, 2 significant ones. Now, AJ Green's already been out, of course, but it would have been a very opportune time to get him back because now you're looking at Tyler Boyd and Auden Tate, who was tied for the most routes run on this team last week and had 6 targets, I believe, on the day, which is pretty encouraging in a really tough matchup where Dalton wasn't even capable of getting the ball out of his hands. I mentioned yesterday and on Tuesday, I'm not opposed to getting to Tyler Eifert here. I'm well aware that it's a risk, but he's seen 5 targets in 3 of 5 games and should see opportunities against the team that allows more fantasy points to the position than any other. So let's start with Dalton. Where are you at on him, and how are you branching off to other positions on the same team?
Yeah, so Dalton on Tuesday, the concerns were all about the line. We still have to monitor that, like you were saying, but it is a really good spot. I mean, Arizona through 4 weeks has already given up 10 touchdown passes, which is second highest in the league. They have yet to have an interception, and they're giving up 289.5 passing yards per game, which is top 10 in the league. So it's just a really favorable spot for defense that's not threatening you with pressure, not threatening you with turning the ball over, and just really letting you walk down the field. So it's an interesting spot also because, they're doing that, but now you have maybe the softest offensive line you're going to get to face. So does it tilt the other way? I'm not sure. So right now I do have interest in Dalton. He's sort of on an outside fringier play for really only team stacks and full game stacks. I like the other side of this more with Murray. So he's going to be somebody who's less of a priority for me. But, man, this matchup is just so good. Moving down, you mentioned Auden Tate. I want to see if the ownership comes up on him after we get later in the week some ownership numbers ran, because I imagine it's going to have to. 16 targets in 2 weeks. He's top 25 in routes run, and that was as primarily a wide receiver 3 for the last 2 weeks. So he's top 25 the last 2 weeks in that. Now he's going to be a wide receiver 2, 38 routes run per week over the last 2. It's just a fantastic role for a guy who saw a good amount of his snaps, about 30 to 40% out of the slot, which we know is very favorable. So another really good matchup against a secondary that is extremely weak. And no John Ross is just going to lead to a lot more. At 3,500, you have other wide receivers down there, but just none are as good of a value as what Auden Tate's going to provide. And he would have to get really, really chalky for me to want to get away from him, especially because it's just so easy to throw him into game stacks and really feel like you're getting a value play.
Yeah, and it's It's a matchup that should really favor him. So I don't disagree, man. I think I probably get to a good amount of him, but I also think, as you pointed out, ownership will probably come up throughout the week. We have ownership projections at awesemo.com. Use the promo code NFL Strategy. Get 50% off your first month. awesemo.com/join if you want to come join the family over there at Awesemo. So I talked to you about Mixon the other day, and I was actually surprised that his ownership came up significantly higher than I thought it would. I thought that Mixon would fly under the radar just based on the fact that, he's been pretty underwhelming this season. It's a bad team. Their offensive line is struggling, seemingly more in the passing game than the run game, but certainly still hasn't been good. Right now, though, Mixon getting pretty significant ownership. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, ninth highest right now. We've got him projected overall on DraftKings. But, here he is coming into a game where his team is finally favored to win at home against a Arizona team that hasn't exactly been ultra stout in run defense. Right now they're ranked, 19th, according to Football Outsiders run DVOA metric. And if you missed it the other day, Joe Mixon was getting opportunities. It was really the only back out of the backfield to see anything until about 3 minutes through the fourth quarter, where the game was out of reach. He was pulled off the field. I don't think because he wasn't effective, because nobody was, but because they threw Gio Bernard in there for mop-up duty. But he was on pace to see probably like 25 total looks, and he still saw 15 carries and 5 targets. So at this price, I think, put it this way, if there was a breakout opportunity for Joe Mixon on the season, this is it for me, Sal.
Yeah, definitely. Arizona giving up just 422 rushing yards so far through 4 weeks. It's just a top 10 spot for a running back who, started to see big usage last week. Saw season high in snaps over 60%. So it's good. It gets difficult when if you're trying to float around in that range, trying to prioritize Mixon over a guy like Fournette. But I do think that, and I would probably be higher on Mixon. Right now I have him as like an 8th interest on just a rankings thing here, but I'd be higher on him if, that ownership was down. I was surprised to see it as high as it was, like you are. So I think it's a really good spot for a running back that does have the pass catching upside. And if you're trending, maybe he is getting healthier and whatnot, but if you're trending to see tons of snaps, 63%, and not play most of the fourth quarter, like this guy was going to play a ton and have probably close to 25 touches. So coming off of that into probably an even more favorable matchup, this is a good spot for Joe Mixon. It's just a matter of do you want to prioritize him over some of these other running backs around that range?
Any other thoughts on this game?
No, I mean, Tyler Boyd and Tyler Eifert. Eifert, if you want to get there, it's as fine of a spot as it will get. He's running a lot of red zone, high upside routes for fantasy, about 20 routes total a game. And then Tyler Boyd, I don't expect John Ross being out to really affect his role in the slot. Damian Willis will be on the outside. Boyd seeing about 2/3 of his snaps, top 12 in the league out of the slot. So it's a really good spot overall for game and team stacks.
Houston and Atlanta. This game is going to garner quite a bit of ownership. Texans 5-point favorites at home. It's been a really rough year, quarter season for the Falcons. It's been ugly. 22-point implied total, 27 for Houston, and a 49 over under. This is the highest on the slate and second highest in week 5 overall. Deshaun Watson, you mentioned, was on Tuesday, and we can always revisit if you've changed your rankings. Just mention why. Was your top quarterback. Is he still coming in as your top or one of your top QBs going into Sunday?
Yeah, I'll say right now he's sort of top 2 as of right now. Coming into tournaments, him and Kyler Murray for team and game stacks are where I'm getting a good amount of right now. And I like the spot. And then on the other side of this, Matt Ryan as well. Those are probably the top 3 right now. But Deshaun Watson, I'm liking more and more throughout the week.
Okay, well, talk to me about this offense with Watson and Hopkins and Fuller and Duke Johnson, who eventually needs to get more work.
Yeah, so what you're going to get here is just a really good matchup for the guy who's 4th on the slate in Deshaun Watson on fantasy points per attempt, favorable team total of about 27. He has, we all know, the rushing upside, about 20 yards per game so far, and always a threat to score there. So he has the weapons, and this is probably the best matchup that they've had so far. They've ran into a couple of situations with zone defenses or just blanket coverage, and that really hurts guys like Hopkins and or Will Fuller. Also, though, just Deshaun Watson not hitting big plays, like last week missing 2 50-plus yard plays to Fuller, 1 a touchdown pass. and another one to the DeAndre Hopkins that who knows what could have happened after he catches that ball. So I think it's a really good spot and a good matchup. We already talked about the game environment. There's going to be ownership on it, but just as like a high level, I think it's a really unique spot where you can run it back with a Hopkins or a Julio and still get the other one and kind of get unique in that manner, but by kind of putting one of them into your lineup instead of some of these top end running backs. I do like that. I like Fuller. I mean, he's still getting air yards. He has a favorable matchup here. Both of these guys do. It's really a breakout spot for both of them who have a ton of air yards that have not yet kind of come to fruition. So what that usually leads to most of the time is a lot of regression coming your way for big upside players. So that's the main guys right there, what everybody would kind of expect. Duke Johnson finally sees just more snaps, but still out-touched massively last week by Carlos Hyde. He should be playing more. He's top 10 in elusive rating on Pro Football Focus. Ran 25 routes last week, which is 6 more than his average from the first 3 weeks. So maybe something coming there if we can keep getting him touches. But for now, it's the Watson, Fuller, Hopkins stacks, and Hopkins is just or Fuller is just way, way too cheap and easy to fit into those.
That's where I'm at too. And when you have that type of big play upside, you're not going to keep him down for long. Deshaun Watson has one of the best adjusted completion percentages on deep passes this year. And I think that will begin to come around, and Will Fuller will start to really open up the field and make a couple big plays. And when he does, you only need one of them. If you get two, even better. But, one 65-yard touchdown from Will Fuller can go a long way. And I'm 100% on board. This is too cheap of a price tag for him. I saw him dropped in some seasonal leagues. Wow. People just get, they get disappointed and think, all right, well, it's over. He can't do anything. Well, Will Fuller is the type of guy that can be productive. And I've heard a lot about Kike QT is there and Stills is there. Well, I mean, Stills has had, 3 or fewer targets in 3 or 4 games. Kiki QT's had 3 targets, 0 targets, 4. I'm really not worried about these guys being anything outside of periphery guys. Whereas with Will Fuller, 6, 7 targets over his last 3. He's still the clear-cut number 2 in Houston.
Yeah, and he's on the field for more snaps than Hopkins right now, 99%. Yeah. So, he's out there. He's getting targets. It's just there's probably about 130 yards that and a touchdown or 2 that has already been missed by Watson and his just wide open play. So he's playing really well. It's just the quarterback play a little bit hurting him.
By the way, just to reinforce one thought I have on Duke Johnson, I can't guarantee at all that he is going to get additional work. But if he does, he's probably going to do something great with it. Because Duke Johnson all season long and really throughout his career has been an efficient back who just hasn't gotten the opportunity. Now, are there reasons for that? Sure. I mean, he's not huge. He's not a guy that you're going to give 20 carries a game, but he should be getting more targets in the passing game than Carlos Hyde. And I feel pretty confident saying that. He's also, by the way, seen from a snap count standpoint, 65% of snaps last week. Really good for a running back. That's his most snaps of the season and way more than week 3 and 4 or 3 and 2. So I could see this begin to trend in the right direction. Will it? I don't know. But Duke Johnson's probably the cheapest to be all season. And I have some interest in tournaments. Even getting 8%, 10% to me seems viable. What about the other side, Sal? Matt Ryan is averaging 44 pass attempts per game. So you're getting a lot of volume for guys like Julio, for Hooper, even guys like Mohamed Sanu. But they can't put points on the board has been an issue for them.
Yeah, that's the first note that I have is, I really like Matt Ryan this week. Right now, I think he ranks number 3 for me. I like this whole game. So, Texans, they're giving up a lot of yards, and Matt Ryan and this offense is getting a lot of passing yards. They're just empty yards. They're not leading in touchdowns. What else is new? It's 3 years now of this post-Shanahan that they can't score in the red zone or even on the other opponent's side of the field. But, Matt Ryan I like here, second in the league behind Mahomes in total yardage. So really picking up chunks, just not finishing these drives. 1,325 so far in 4 weeks. And this Texans defense, if you look at just high levels, it's going to come in the passing game. And the passing D is maybe stout or above average, but it's very skewed to good quarterback play and bad quarterback play. So week 1, they get Drew Brees in that primetime game. He goes for almost 400 yards, 2 touchdowns. Then week 2, they get Gardner Minshew on his first start ever. Has a decent start, 220 yards or so, but doesn't do much. And it's Gardner Minshew on his first start. Phillip Rivers week 3 goes for over 300, a couple touchdowns. And then they get Kyle Allen week 4, who I'm not that big of a believer in Kyle Allen. I think his results against the Cardinals really skewed some expectations. So you're getting Matt Ryan now, who I would push closer to being the type of level of Drew Brees and or Philip Rivers. So I think this is a good spot for him to continue, have a fifth straight 300-yard game. And it's just a matter of coming down with some touchdowns to really have a ceiling or a tournament winning day. And he has the pieces to pair it with. Julio, we know you can pair him all the time. If I'm having a stack, it's going to have Julio Jones in it. This team is giving up the 6th most DraftKings points per game to the wide receiver. It's just a really good spot for Julio, and I would probably pair it with Ridley over Hooper and or Sanu. Pretty much Ridley and Hooper are like inversely kind of affect each other. If Hooper has a good game, Ridley's not going to, and this sets up much better since it's not going to be zone or coverage or just blanket coverage for a guy like Ridley on the other side, take advantage of some double teams. So that's where I'm at. I think Hooper on a one-off is completely fine. But I'm just not going to get there because I like some other options in that 4K range for tight ends this week.
Quick answer: Julio, Hopkins, or Allen?
Hopkins.
Okay. Over Julio and Allen? Okay. I like it. How much of that has to do with liking Deshaun Watson more than both of their quarterbacks this week?
Yeah, that's like a good piece of it. And then Chris Harris Jr. is really scaring me off of Keenan Allen a little bit.
Yeah, I can see that for sure. Let's talk about the Saints in Tampa Bay. New Orleans at home, Teddy Bridgewater at the helm. I can't say that's encouraging. He's been a check down game manager, and I think game manager's overused. But if you watch Teddy Bridgewater, that's really all he's doing. They have a 24.8 total, 21.75 for the Bucs, coming off a huge road victory against the Rams where they dropped 55 points on them. All but 7 of them came on offense. 46.5 over under here, tied for the second highest on the main slate. Let's start with the Saints and just run through the real contributors here, and there are only a couple of them. There's Alvin Kamara, who actually faces a very stout Tampa Bay run defense, but is involved pretty heavily in the passing game. But the weird thing is, with Bridgewater playing a lot of week 2, and then all of week 3, and then all of week 4, Kamara saw 3 targets in week 4 and 3 in week 2. That's a little bit discouraging. I'm not going to lie about that. But on the other, at wide receiver, Michael Thomas is just way too cheap. And he's not a ridiculously big play guy. Usually you'll see a long reception of like 25 yards, but he just does so much. He finds ways to haul in almost, any pass that's thrown his way. And at 6,600 on DraftKings, to me, that just seems like a spot that's going to be very, very difficult to ignore in a matchup with the Tampa Bay Bucs team that defensively, their clear biggest weakness is their secondary.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I guess start with Michael Thomas is that he's probably just, at least in hindsight, seems obvious like as the best wide receiver play on the slate when it comes to just the price tag, factoring that in, maybe not pure points, but it's tough to even say point per dollar without Tate there. But if you're just talking about for 6.6K price, Michael Thomas is probably $1,000 too cheap for the upside he possesses. Yeah, it doesn't really matter for me that Drew Brees isn't out there because Teddy Bridgewater, like you said, a game manager, Teddy check down, whatever people want to call him, that perfectly fits Michael Thomas, a guy who usually catches 85, 90% of the targets seen his way, and they're like 10 yards down the field, and he does some stuff after the catch, and he's dynamic in the red zone. So Michael Thomas is a great play, 10.5 targets per game. He has almost a 43% share of this team's air yards. So the big thing there is that, like, he's obviously fantastic price, top 10 matchup in the league right now versus the secondary for him in terms of being in the bottom 10, I guess you can say. But there's also no other depth like on this team. You have Keith Kirkwood on IR. You have Traquan battling injuries. Ted Ginn's a deep guy, which we know this offense isn't really targeting, especially Teddy Bridgewater, too much downfield. So really like Michael Thomas, like the way his low ADOT kind of matches and gels well with Teddy Bridgewater. Alvin Kamara, the other main piece of this offense. Yeah, it's a little bit concerning. We saw him go nuclear when nobody was on him 2 weeks ago, but it's just really tough to want to prioritize him over any of those other 7,500 David Johnson or above running backs this week. You have Tampa Bay just so stout up front. I mean, it's Vita Vea, it's Ndamukong Suh. Even Carl Nassib, former Penn Stater out there, is like reviving his career just in the run game and generating pressure. Like that defensive line right now is pretty scary. So it's a spot overall that I'm probably staying away from in this matchup. So it's really Michael Thomas here. I wish Jared Cook was just getting more snaps. I don't know why. I know he had an injury earlier in the year if he's battling that a little bit. But it also adds up for him in terms of Teddy Bridgewater short passes to a guy like Jared Cook. he's just not staying on the field enough. So it's really just Michael Thomas from the Saints here. And due to the context of the slate, not much Kamara. I will say that Shaq Barrett, defensive lineman, one of the guys up front for Tampa Bay, didn't practice with a groin injury Wednesday. So that's something that we would monitor. But he's on the field a lot as well. But it won't shift a ton for me if he's out.
Yeah. I mean, I look at this game and I don't exactly see a ton to love with the Saints. Some of that because of Bridgewater. I guess I don't like a lot from a stacking perspective. Like, can you find ways to game stack this? I think you can. Again, it has one of the higher totals. But you know what? In order for us to really get a good idea of how viable it is from a game stacking standpoint, and Tampa Bay was involved in the in the tournament winning, Millie Maker winning, 100K winning lineups last week, along with guys like Godwin and Evans, and on the opposite side, Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. So do I think that Winston follows up that performance with another one? I don't know, probably not. But the fascinating thing about him and what makes him so unique is that he is always capable of just erupting. And then he's capable of going out there and throwing 3 interceptions to no touchdowns. Well, here we have him this week against the New Orleans Saints. They're only 3-point dogs, a lot of that having to do with Breeze not being there, but only 3-point dogs, Sal. And their total isn't particularly high. It's not awful. But whenever you have guys like Godwin and Evans that can catch passes, it allows somebody like Winston to really open things up if things get going well.
Yeah, so exactly what you said. It's a tough spot to run a team or game stack. I was saying this last week and got burnt by it, though. Trying to look at it a little bit. So Mike Evans will get Lattimore here. So
Marshall Lattimore is giving him a lot of trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Historically, just gives Evans trouble. This year, though, Lattimore giving up the most receptions and yards, which is good to note. But it's also good to note that last week he played the best week he's played, shutting down Amari Cooper. So although he had a bad first 3 weeks, he kind of came around last week. And we know that he's a quality cornerback. So this week can kind of go either way there. You're getting over 40% of the air yards from this team going to Mike Evans. You're getting the price tag coming up on Chris Godwin. It's just tough for me to prioritize these guys over like the Michael Thomases and some other players like Tyler Boyd we talked about in that 6K range if I do want to get there. Godwin's price point just bopping back and forth, 69, then 69. Godwin, he's probably going to have the more favorable matchup. Most likely PJ Williams, who's always been a great tackler, but we all pick on him for his coverage at times, probably below average so far this year there. Allowed 2 touchdowns already this season. So the cornerback play isn't that great for the Saints, something we're used to saying from the second half of last year and really majority of last year. It's just a matter of do you want to prioritize those guys. I'd probably pick out Evans, although he's had trouble against Lattimore in the past. Has also had positive spots, and Lattimore seems to be having a trending season towards better after one game. But again, it's just one game. So not a lot here. They're not priorities on a wide receiver or quarterback sheet, but it is an interesting spot to say the least.
What about Ronald Jones? We don't have to spend a ton of time here, but he clearly appears to be surfacing as the back that's going to begin to get more of the work and more than Peyton Barber going forward. I think he should. I don't believe in Peyton Barber. That isn't to say I fully believe in Ronald Jones, but I do think he's a bit more explosive, and we've seen that with a few long plays over the past couple of weeks. 24-yard run, 25, 41-yard reception in week 3. Like, he is capable of breaking off some big plays, and I think that's valuable. He's also, averaging a respectable 4.7 yards per carry on the season and has 71 yards on 3 receptions. So he has not been that bad. Pass blocking's always been an issue, which has made it hard to keep him on the field, but he played a season high 40%, probably a career high 40%, 49% of snaps last week. Any interest in a cheap Ronald Jones, or do we have better backs to target this week?
I think there's better backs this week, but definitely something to really watch closely. And hopefully,
that's where I'm at as well.
Yeah, and hopefully next week we still get favorable price, doesn't blow up or something. But Ronald Jones, lots of interesting things. He ran more routes than Ogunbowale last week, DeRay Ogunbowale, who's been the pass catching back. And he's had a 58% success rate when he does carry the ball, which is top 5 on the slate. So lots of things trending positive for him. He's been very effective in that backfield, finally getting more carries than Peyton Barber 2 weeks ago. That's the only concern is 2 weeks ago, Peyton Barber was the new toy with 23, or maybe not new, but the new hype with 23 carries, and then it quickly shifts the other way. But Jones has just consistently been playing well. It's a tough week where last week Zeke does nothing against this defense. And in a post game, a reporter asks him, is it something with conditioning? And he's like, that was just a really good defense.
They're really good.
Yeah, that was just a really good run defense. So not this week for Ronald Jones, but it's a really interesting spot moving forward.
Talk to me about the Giants and Minnesota Vikings. Stefon Diggs is pissed off, didn't show up at practice for non-injury reasons. Really, who knows what's going on there? I certainly don't. I don't know. I think players are getting, I shouldn't speculate on what's going on, but I think it's getting a little bit out of control that players are just, not playing whenever they feel like it or not showing up to practice. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah, it's the Antonio Brown effect, right? So far, the most.
Yep.
But
I don't want to trigger anybody.
Starting on the Minnesota side of the ball, I know Cousins was getting, I don't know if he still is, I haven't looked too much around the industry, but early week hype. I'm just not going to get there. I get that the matchup's really good. I get that now with this Diggs stuff, both guys are screaming for the ball and Diggs having frustration, stealing after the game, saying they need to throw the ball more. But it's still going to be a run first team. Like maybe they throw a couple more targets those guys' ways, but I mean, they still threw a team high last week. I think over 35 times for Kirk Cousins, the most they did throw. So it was weird that they came out that week and said something about it, especially when Diggs goes for over 100 yards. So it's a little bit interesting, maybe more going on in the locker room. Like you said, can't speculate too much not being there, but it's just Dalvin Cook from this side of the ball. I mean, it's a great spot, a road favorite here. He's getting over 22 attempts per game. He showed last week, which I thought was really important, just the ability to be game flow independent. Like you have that with McCaffrey, Barkley when he's healthy, Kamara. It doesn't matter if your team gets down or if it's a tough matchup, you catch 6 balls like you did last week. It doesn't matter who you're playing. You're still going to be in play, even if you're priced up there. And that's exactly what we get this week from him. He's going to be in play, whether they're ahead or behind. It scripts to be ahead, so that's more favorable for him. But yeah, the Giants are allowing right now, they're around middle of the pack, just over 90 yards per game on the ground. He's the number 1 rated Pro Football running back. DER, he's up there. Success rate's fantastic. 10 red zone attempts. Like, it's a lot of good stuff. It's just, even then, like, I feel bad saying he's not like my favorite or second, and he falls to kind of the middle of those 5 guys up top for me, even though how good of a spot it is for him. And the fact that he showed just game flow independence last week is fantastic. Like, I was not expecting 6 catches on 35 attempts from Kirk Cousins. So I think that's the main piece that I get to here. If you want to go a little more Adam Thielen than usual because you think he is the squeaky wheel, I guess that's okay. But I'm just going to stick to what we've seen the script be from this team.
Right. Could it happen? Absolutely. Do we think it's going to happen because of what we've seen from the offense? No. As you mentioned, it could be a squeaky wheel situation, but it's hard to make decisions off of instinct or off of a narrative when we have guys, Sal, that we don't need narrative. We don't need a guttural feeling to play them. We just know that they're really good and they're getting 10 targets per game.
Yeah, exactly.
So what about, and by the way, Dalvin Cook is just in a absolutely spectacular spot, and it'll be very difficult to get away from him. He's on the road, but this team is also, favored against the Giants on the road. Things can always go wrong, but from a game script perspective, it's tough to find something more appealing than this. 43.5 over under, 5.5 point favorites, 24.5 point implied total. Only 19 for the Giants. We'll turn to that page now. Wayne Gallman was solid last week. I likely won't be getting to him this week. Honestly, in this tough matchup, I'd rather play Ronald Jones and take a near $1,000 discount because I think Wayne Gallman had a great game, okay? But I don't think that's repeatable in a spot like this at all. Could I be wrong? Sure, but they had a lead all game over maybe the worst team in the league in Washington, them in Miami. This is a very difficult or different situation, but still you've got guys like Ingram. Now that Daniel Jones is under center, you've got Sterling Shepard, and now add another wrinkle into all of this. Golden Tate has been activated to the 53-man roster after his 4-game suspension. So that's what you have, Sal. Take it away.
Yeah, so I guess starting in the backfield, Saquon, we don't know what's happening right now. I'm just going to go with the assumption that he doesn't play. So Gallman, like you said, a really difficult matchup. A guy who had a really good week, but only 60% of the snaps. John Hilliman was on for the remainder, about 38% there. The good thing with Wayne Gallman is he catches just a ton of balls in his career. 1 catch per every 10 snaps, which for him is going to equate to targets, which is going to just equate to 4 catches most games that he's out there for that much work. That said, though, the ground is just a terrible spot for him here on the ground game, so I'm probably not going to get there. The receiving game is very interesting. So I expect Sterling Shepard to move to the outside and come out of the slot. We saw this a little bit last year when Odell was banged up. He came out of the slot, played primarily on the outside. And with Golden Tate coming back being primarily a slot receiver, I think Golden Tate goes into the slot. Daniel Jones has been favoring Sterling Shepard the past 2 weeks in his first 2 starts, but I don't think that's because he's Sterling Shepard. I think that's because he was in the slot. So Golden Tate's somebody at 4,600 coming off his suspension. As long as there's no, it's not like he's coming off an injury. As long as there's no news that he's not conditioned or anything over the next few days, I'm going to have interest. He's probably the guy I actually like the most from this team. Is Golden Tate. No interest in Sterling Shepard moving outside against Xavier Rhodes, which I don't think is an impossible matchup, but he's just been so much more effective in the slot, which I think Golden Tate will be there. So it's Golden Tate and then Evan Ingram. Yeah, at the tight end position, I'm favoring other guys around the price range, but there's no saying that he's top 2 tight end on the slate this week. If you want to pay for it, it's not even paying that much. But for right now, it's Evan Ingram and Golden Tate for me, and really all interest in Sterling Shepard, especially if you own him in season long. As long as Golden Tate's there, I would try and sell a little bit high on him after these last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I'm with you. Anything else on this game?
No, it's not that attractive of a game outside of like Dalvin Cook.
All right. 1 second here. Keep it moving. Oakland and Chicago. Here's an exciting game. Everyone should be pretty stoked about this one. I kid. It's pretty rough, man. Like I could find a lot of things wrong with this game. Not a whole lot right. 40.5 over under, 17.8 implied total for Oakland, 22.8 for Chicago. That's not that high, Sal. One of the reasons being that Mitch Trubisky separated his shoulder. But did Chase Daniel really seem like that much of a downgrade? My humble opinion, not really. Mitch Trubisky has not looked that good. But here's how I see it. And I think I'm in the minority here, which I kind of am okay with. I could see this being a quote-unquote breakout spot or coming out party for David Montgomery. He's seen 18 carries against Denver in a game that they won by 2 points. 13 against Washington. You would have liked to see more, but that game was pretty much over at the start of the second half. And then 21 against Minnesota in a game where they used him to run down the clock, control the time of possession, and seal the deal. So you could look at a guy like Allen Robinson. I wouldn't argue you there. Hell, I wouldn't even argue that Oakland's run defense has been at least semi-competent this season. But I do think if David Montgomery, I should say, is going to be in a spot where he's basically overlooked, then I'm willing to get there. So right now, our ownership was updated yesterday. And of course, as we move forward throughout the week, it will update and it will change to become more accurate as we are afforded more information. But right now, David Montgomery getting like 8% on DraftKings. Do I love him? No, because his price is a little bit higher than I'd like. But at the same time, I really would not be shocked if this was a 22 carry, 100-yard, 2-touchdown game for him. The only downside is that you have Tariq Cohen in the passing game, but he's seen 3 and 5 targets over his last 3. And Montgomery is likely someone that I will do a little bit more research on leading up to Sunday in a game where they are pretty heavy favorites on the road. All right, Sal, now that I'm out of breath, what's your take on the Chicago offense?
Yeah, I think you said it. I think I'm there with you on the low ownership on David Montgomery. Look, it's a slate where you have the top end running backs. And if you want to put, as I tried to do some weeks, but don't force it, if you just want to put 3 running backs into your lineup or even just open up more wide receiver play, you probably have to go down at running back somewhere else. And David Montgomery's the guy who makes sense for me. He's a favorite. He's now 3 weeks in a row seen 16 plus touches, averaging 17.5 touches per game. And that number just keeps trending upwards. Chicago are 5-point favorites here on the road, but it's a good spot. And then you add in that, okay, so a couple of things here. Markel Lee, they put on IR last week. He's a linebacker, rotational player, doesn't play a ton, but linebacker, stop the run. Vontaze Burfict, he's suspended for the entire season. Not a great run stop player, but again, now you have to fill in second stringers for these linebackers, 2 down on a pecking order of about 5, maybe 6. So I think it's a good spot for him. You mentioned he is active in the receiving game, not that great. But if you're going to tell me that he's going to average 3.5, 4 targets a game, I'll take that. And at the price tag of 52, I actually do like that price tag. The problem is adjusted line play. This line is pretty bad. But if you're telling me that I'm getting him at 5,200 instead of some of my other options that are cheaper at like 64, Leonard Fournette, 61, Joe Mixon, I actually do like what it's been opening up so far. So David Montgomery is probably the main play from this game. And also right now, Oakland's run defense on Pro Football Focus is bottom 5 in the league. So I like that. You mentioned Allen Robinson. All of his catches, all 7 catches on 7 targets for 77 yards were from Daniels last week. In the past, when Daniels has started over the past couple of years, he has targeted Allen Robinson, the second most, right behind Tariq Cohen on this team. So I think Robinson's an interesting tournament play, but I much prefer David Montgomery from this team, and also a cheaper price point. Javon Wims, we saw him have in preseasons be very successful, especially last year. And he got snaps ahead of Anthony Miller, which was surprising to me. If Taylor Gabriel's still in the concussion protocol, Wims becomes a cheaper option, but I think he's the same exact price as Auden Tate. And if Tate's ownership doesn't skyrocket, I'd rather just stick to Tate. So like you were mentioning, it's mainly David Montgomery here. And I think this is a very under not talked about too much spot, underrepresented spot on how good of a spot it really is for David Montgomery.
Yeah. I would say with Montgomery, here's how I put it. He's my primary play from this game, but probably still a secondary play overall for me. But do I expect to have some Montgomery? I do. We'll go back to Fournette, Sal, not to waste any more time here, but volume over efficiency can take you a long way, especially when the volume turns into efficiency, and then it's the best of both worlds. Talk to me quickly about Oakland. Darren Waller has been phenomenal. A top tight end this season. No, hands down, he has been a top tight end this season. There's no question about it, especially from a consistency standpoint, where even guys like Kelsey and Ertz and Mark Andrews have had some underwhelming games. You get double-digit fantasy points, 12+ in all 4 games from Waller this season, 7+ targets in each. But if you want to talk about a very difficult matchup, it doesn't get much tougher than the Bears.
Yeah, so Darren Waller is the main thing that stands out here. Burfitt suspended for the year just for their team news, and Tyrell Williams did not practice on Wednesday, so keep an eye on that. But Darren Waller, I think it's tight end is probably the position the most, and also only 4 weeks into the year for data to be skewed a little bit. But tight ends, if you're not playing one of like the top 5 tight ends in the league, you're probably going to seem like a really good defense against them. So I went back just looking at the Bears so far on defense. Jimmy Graham week 1, 3 catches, 30 yards and a touchdown. Rookie Noah Fant week 2, 4 catches, 43 yards. Week 3, Redskins tight ends combined for 4 catches and 49 yards. And then last week, Kyle Rudolph, who's just not running a ton of routes, 1 catch for 12. So I would say Darren Waller is better than all of those players. And some of them put in just 7-8 point performances. We know he's going to run a lot more routes than most of them. I think this is actually a fine spot. And the thing that I'll say the most is keep an eye on Roquan Smith. There's just weird stuff coming out of Bears camp right now. Like he's just not playing in really, I don't know if it's contract situations or what, but it's undisclosed why he's not practicing right now. If he's back, yeah, much worse for Darren Waller. If he's out, it's a lot easier for Darren Waller, similar to last week when there was no Darius Leonard against him. Just that caliber of a linebacker being out is going to open up a lot more. Outside of that, though, no interest in this team. I do think Josh Jacobs has been very, very effective. It's just not the spot. So, yeah, it's just Waller, and keep an eye on Roquan Smith. I really don't know what's going on with Roquan Smith.
Yeah, me neither. It's a good point to keep an eye on, though. We're definitely not making the time we were looking for. but there are a couple games that we're not going to spend a lot of time on at all. This one is not one of them, though. Philly and New York, Philadelphia Eagles, very, very big favorites on this slate. They are the second biggest favorites on the slate outside of the Patriots, who are 15-point favorites on the road against the Redskins. 13.5 at home, Lincoln Financial Field for the Eagles. 28.5 point over under. 43.5 point total as well. So nothing crazy, but keep in mind that total is so low because the New York Jets have the second lowest total at 15. Very, very interesting spot for the Eagles. I'm nervous about targeting this, though, because I mentioned this stat to you the other day. I don't remember the exact win-loss, but it's like when the Eagles rush for over 100 yards, they're like 24-3. When they don't under Peterson, they're 1-13, I think it was. That to me makes a big difference because this could be one of those games where if Luke Falk is at the helm and the Eagles secondary isn't getting carved to shit as they've been done to by Aaron Rodgers and Case Keenum and if not really Stafford, but you get the point. Matt Ryan, of course, even though he threw a couple picks, it's an aggressive defense, but one that makes a lot of mistakes. I don't know if Falk can exploit that, which means if that's the case, then I could see them just going heavy run game with Howard and Sanders. And how the hell do we figure out which one of them we want to play? So while I love the total, I love the spread, it's very difficult for me to put my finger on where the production will come from based on the game script.
Yeah, so the Eagles side of it, yeah. So earlier in the week, I really like Carson Wentz. I still have him as a top 5 quarterback option. If I look right now, I think he's number 4. But you just mentioned some of the concerns. Deshaun Jackson doesn't practice with the abdominal injury still. It doesn't seem like he's trending in the right direction as of Wednesday. A couple things I'll mention, though, is if you look on websites like Pro Football Focus and Spots, the Jets are going to pop up as if they're like an elite secondary. I think a lot of that is being skewed by a week 1 pick 6 off of Josh Allen by C.J. Mosley. Against the New England Patriots, a pick 6 off of Jared Stidman.
Yeah, in a game that was already out of reach.
Exactly, yeah. Like in 2 out of 3 weeks to Baker and Brady, who are comparable quarterbacks like just Carson Wentz, they gave up over 300 yards in a very solid performance. So I still do think this is a fine spot for Wentz, especially if Alshon's a little bit healthier. Would love to see Deshaun Jackson out there. But I think it's an okay tournament spot for him. And also, people are trying to tell me that similar to how good the Jets defense has performed because they're ranking high because they're a scoring defense. And just variant stats against Jared Stidham right now in 4 weeks, 3 weeks really with a bye. But Zach Ertz, I think, is in a great spot. I mean, you have C.J. Mosley doesn't practice. He was ruled out on Sunday that he wasn't going to practice Wednesday, which is never good. So it's something that's somewhat serious. And Zach Ertz, I mean, this Jets defense hasn't played a tight end yet. Tom Sweeney, Demetrius Harris with no David Njoku, and Ryan Izzo are the primary tight ends they've played so far. So Ertz is clearly tiers and many tiers. I can't even count them. Tiers above those guys at tight end. So I think it's an interesting stack spot, even if you just go Ertz and Wentz. The concern is, like you said, they just start to run the ball against the defense of the Jets because they're up so big because Luke Falk can't get a first down. So it's a risk that I'll probably take in spots in tournaments, but won't be one of my main 3 priorities and probably cracks the top 5.
Okay, and by the way, I will say right now, I do not expect Deshaun Jackson to play.
Yeah, that's how it's trending.
And here's a very simple reason for this. Do you want to rush him back against the Jets, Sal? Or do you want him where they go on the road for 3 straight games in a very difficult stretch? To me, I wouldn't rush the guy back with the abdominal strain.
Yeah, that's true. And I agree. And it seems like all the sentiment from Peterson is not like optimism about his status right now. It's just very hush-hush and quick and direct.
Right. Now that they have Alshon back, it definitely helps a lot. Exactly.
And it just takes so much pressure off of what the middle of the field does for Ertz. So it's almost like two players are back in that sense.
What about the Jets side of the ball? Is the passing volume enough for Le'Veon Bell? Do you have any interest in Robbie Anderson? That would be my guy. And the reason Bell wouldn't be my guy, very quickly, and I'll pass it over to you, is because that same passing volume for Bell, I could probably get that for David Johnson in an offense that has a better chance of winning, keeping the game close, and is facing a worse overall defense, particularly on the ground.
Yeah, exactly. This is just a brutal matchup on the ground. You're hoping to get it all in the receiving game. Even with that bye, he's still top 10 in routes run as a running back with 95, which is just crazy
right.
for Bell's role in the receiving game. But like you said, I'd rather pay up a little bit more. You're in a similar price range where other guys have better matchups and usage, like Fournette, maybe even Mixon. So I'm just not going to get to Bell. The guy I would get to would be in GPP only. I have written next to it, very low interest, but this secondary, if you think Luke Falk can do anything, Robbie Anderson is in a really good spot. And Anderson's just run into some really bad matchups. I mean, a shadow matchup against Tre'Davious White week 1. Denzel Ward, where he performed pretty good, 4 catches on 6 targets for 81 yards. And then last week he gets Stephon Gilmore, top 2 cornerback in the league as far as I'm concerned. So this is a guy who's just getting a ton of opportunity or a decent amount of opportunity in terms of the air yardage and just tough matchups. So if you trust Luke Falk, I personally do not, so I'm not going to be getting to Anderson, but that'd be the one spot because, yeah, Avonte Maddox is week to week, probably not going to play. Sidney Jones limited in practice with a hamstring, and if they're healthy, they're not great cornerbacks. So that's the one spot for the Jets, but for the most part, it's a wash for me. Like I said, C.J. Mosley does not practice, and then they're expecting Quinnen Williams back on defense, so we'll see how that turns out.
Yeah, I will say right now, I probably will have some Robbie Anderson. Big risk, no question. I think the reward is worth it here. I do. And if that's the case, I'm willing to give it some shots. He's inexpensive, and he's at a position where at his price point, I could see a lot of people playing similarly priced guys with lower ceilings. So that's where I'm at. Is it risky? No question. Well aware. But this is a decimated Eagles secondary that, honestly, even Luke Falk might be able to connect on one or two, as crazy as it sounds. Okay, Pittsburgh and Baltimore. This has always been a great divisional battle. It gets, dirty. It's fierce. It's pretty fantastic football to watch. Maybe not this season, though, Sal. The game is pretty ugly from an over-under standpoint. 44 is actually not terrible. I think Baltimore's defense has been exposed the past couple weeks, man. They've got some positive aspects of this, but man, Nick Chubb rattling off an 88-yard touchdown, 3 overall on the day. You've mentioned it, I've mentioned it. Their slot corners, they've been crushed by quality slot receivers. 23.8 implied total for Baltimore on the road, 20.3 for the Steelers, and a 44 over under. Steelers are 3.5-point home dogs. Take this away and do this for me. Hit both teams here, because right after our show around 12:30, Ben Rasa and Alex Baker, Awesemo himself, the number 1 ranked DFS player in the world, will be trying out a new time slot for the showdown slate today. Instead of going right up before lock, we wanted to give you guys a little bit more time to watch the show if you wanted to build lineups prior to the game and not right as we lead up to it. So getting started shortly after this NFL strategy show will be Ben Rasa and Alex Baker breaking down this showdown slate. Definitely check that out and hang around. It will be a lot of fun, and those guys always do a great job. All right, go ahead, Sal.
So Baltimore side of it, Mark Andrews, this foot injury, I think, is just messing with him. He misses practice on Wednesday, saw his least usage of the year in terms of snaps, 42. So I don't have much interest there. I think this is a bigger concern, and foot injuries, they will linger. That seems like what's happening here from all the context we have. Hollywood Brown, he should have caught a touchdown last week, but regardless, this week, if you can compress him, which Minkah Fitzpatrick rarely gets beat deep, and you have Joe Hayden, who I still think is a quality cornerback out there, you make them much more narrow of this team. And we saw it last week. They just became so much more predictable when you could take away Hollywood Brown and then you had an injured tight end on the field. So I don't have much interest here overall, to be honest with you. I mean, it's really on the other side of this game where the interest comes in. Lamar Jackson, sure, you can still run him naked because of the rushing upside. If you ran him naked last week, you felt pretty good because for the most part, his team doesn't do much. Mark Andrews saved by a touchdown. So for me, it's interest in Lamar Jackson if you want to run him naked, but just compared to the other quarterbacks on the slate, not much interest overall. I kind of respect this Pittsburgh defense more than most people do. People overreacting to a week 1 against New England where they had a lot of guys injured, no Minkah Fitzpatrick then. Since then, it's been pretty stable, I would say, or at least better than the initial overreactions. On the Pittsburgh side is where I think it's interesting. No practice for Connor, no practice for Juju on Wednesday. We obviously have to watch that because Jalen Samuel becomes a much better play, even though it's against a stout defense. But if he's going to be as involved in the passing game, it becomes a much better play if Connor is out. So something we have to watch. I'd expect Marlon Humphrey to be on Deontay Johnson on the outside. Juju's going to run a lot of routes in the slot, which you were hinting. Yeah, Baltimore has been bad against the slot. Tavon Young, they have not had all year. They're not going to have him all year with a really bad neck injury. Could potentially career ending for him. Week 1, it's a wash. They face Miami. Not much there anyways. Week 2, and Albert Wilson gets hurt in the slot. Week 2, the Cardinals have 200-yard receivers out of the slot. Hardman, week 3, has 97 yards and a long touchdown out of the slot. And then Landry just goes nuclear for 167. So this is a really good Juju spot if you were ever to still believe in him. It's just a matter of the price points right there with Michael Thomas, Boyd in them. But I am going to have Juju in tournaments if indeed he comes in healthy. If he doesn't come in healthy and Connor doesn't come in healthy, there's not much I'm going to want here outside of maybe some Jalen Samuel.
Yeah. When you have an A-dot of 3 in week 4, that's a little bit unsettling. But what it tells me, though, and when it tells me is they unquestionably made an effort to work the running backs into the game to the point where Mason Rudolph can feel comfortable, knowing that their defense would be able to get to Andy Dalton, and it worked. The game plan here will rely a whole lot on how if Pittsburgh doesn't fall behind. If they don't fall behind, you can afford to dink and dunk it and have 16 combined passes to Connor and Samuel, 17 to running backs on 30 targets. If they happen to fall behind here, that's when I think someone like Juju, someone like Deontay Johnson become a lot more viable. If this is a game where you're not worried about needing to pace the opponent or put points on the board, that's when I think, especially if Connor was out, that's when I think Samuel becomes even more valuable. So I think game script, I think the way this game plays out has a lot to do with who's viable and who isn't from the Pittsburgh side this Sunday, Sal.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
All right, talking Tennessee. Oh, and by the way, if James Conner doesn't play, you're pretty much just going to have to go with a lot of Jalen Samuel, not because you love him, but because he's going to be involved in the passing game. And my assumption is that he gets a ton of work if that's the case. And Baltimore's run defense got absolutely shit on last week. So, take that for what it's worth. Buffalo and Tennessee, I really don't have much at all here. Matt Barkley is looking like he's primed to get the start with Josh Allen still in concussion protocol. There is so much not to like about this game. I'm a big Derrick Henry guy. I've stated multiple times I think he's going to get 300 plus carries when the season comes to an end. The problem is, it's a really good Buffalo defense. This is a game that I could see finishing 10-7.
Yeah, it's really good. It's top 3 on Pro Football Focus. They rank top 2 or number 1 in a lot of categories. The defense is too good for me, honestly. The only thing I will mention is Delaney Walker doesn't practice on Wednesday. There's other tight ends I like more, but I do think he's viable. They're going to take away the outside of the field here. You're going to have Corey Davis pretty much shadowed and just shut down by Tre'Davious White, if I had to imagine. And then on the other side, A.J. Brown is good, but he's just not on the field enough because they run a lot of just 2 wide receiver sets or 1 wide receiver set because Henry touches the ball 23 times a game. So it's just Delaney Walker in the middle of the field. I think they're really going to have to move through him and Adam Humphries, but not to an extent where I feel comfortable against this defense or an extent where I feel comfortable enough compared to the other players at those price ranges in the position on the slate. So really nothing outside of maybe a little Delaney Walker interest from Tennessee. Buffalo, nothing, especially if Josh Allen's out, still in the concussion protocol. Just zero interest. Zay Jones does not practice Wednesday. Nothing major there. Good to see Devin Singletary limited participant on Wednesday, but there's just really, this game just seems gross. If you like defense, I guess this is one for you.
All right. Washington and the New England Patriots. Like I said, Washington, the biggest dog on the slate, and they're playing at home. I mean, this is just pretty heinous from top to bottom. Terry McLaurin, limited practice participant yesterday. We'll see where he's at today. These hamstring injuries can linger, especially for a speed guy. You need to have all those lower body parts, well, most of them, working well for professional football. It's ugly. Maybe Chris Thompson, reels off 9 receptions, but seems unlikely, and his ceiling seems to be very low. Trey Quinn has an ADOT of like 0.3. And then the other side, of course, you've got guys like Josh Gordon. You've got Julian Edelman. You have James White, Sonny Michel. But again, where does the ball go to? Who's going to get the bulk of the carries or bulk of the overall work? And will it just be a game where Sonny Michel can run it down their throats and finally break out for some solid efficiency? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, I mean, New England's just always, it's the most difficult spot. Every time I do these game-by-game notes and stuff, it's like
it sucks.
It sucks. It seems like you're saying the same stuff. So I would say that this is a team that if they get ahead, they don't care. They'll keep throwing. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to throw 45 times. They might throw 30 times, but Brady's just picking his spots. So I don't have concern about him just not playing. We saw him come out for like 2 drives against the Jets, but that was just all but over. So it's a spot where I do have interest in Josh Gordon. He popped up on the injury report yesterday, but in a limited fashion. If he's playing, this is the first time or the first really good matchup. And for a lot of teams, we'll say that versus Washington secondary, but he's been shadowed by Xavier Howard, Tre'Davious White this year, 2 of the better cornerbacks. This is a spot where he finally has just nothing in his way in terms of being dominant, both in speed and just both in size. So I do like Josh Gordon in this matchup, but really, I mean, everybody's in a good spot. This Washington defense isn't strong really anywhere. Philip Dorsett's in a good spot. Edelman, the backfield. So the way that I look at it is in the receiving game, I'm going to favor Josh Gordon, then Edelman. And in the backfield, yeah, it was good to see Sonny Michel touch the ball 17 times last week. And this game script sets up nicely once again. So he's cheap. It's encouraging. I do prefer David Montgomery down in that range. We talked about him earlier. So I'm probably not going to get to Michel. But it is a fine spot. Yeah, this game as a whole just seems like a wash, but I do think there's pieces to the New England side with such a high total that I want to get to, and I'm probably going to have the most Josh Gordon out of it.
All right. Yeah, there's really not much more on this game, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
There isn't. It's just very tough to analyze. If you wanted to stack it, well, fine. I think running it back is tough, though. You're going to run it back with McLaurin. in a very, very, very difficult matchup. I mean, sure, if you want, you can, but who do you think he's going to – right now it's showing shadow coverage for Jason McCourty, who Jason McCourty this season has been very good. PFF actually has him as a top 5 cornerback grade on the year. Pretty impressive.
Yeah, this secondary, I mean, people can say what they want about the first 3 weeks of this schedule or even 4 weeks. This secondary, it doesn't matter who you're playing out there. They've been just that good. I mean, the McCourty brothers, you even have J.C. Jackson playing well. Everybody knows Stephon Gilmore, how good these guys are. It is really, really stout and scary. Like Terry McLaurin, he's limited fashion, seems like he's going to play, but he might be better just sitting this one out and not having to worry about it because it's going to be tough.
Yeah, no question. All right, 2 to go here.
Yep.
And tomorrow we've got Manny Laura, Chris Randone with some lineup construction. Going to take a look at Fantasy Cruncher as well. Listen, even if you're not someone that MMEs every week, you play 3 max or single entry and or cash, and you're not running out 150 lineups, that show's still really valuable. So check them out, 11 a.m. Eastern time. And then Sal, you'll be with Chris Randone on Saturday with our final tune-up, our last look heading into the week. That's how we close out the NFL strategy show. But we close this one out with 2 games, the Chargers and the Denver Broncos. We start with them. This game could be interesting. I'm not willing to just throw it out the window entirely. But what we need to do is we need to start with what are we expecting in the backfield between Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Gordon was active last week. However, he did not play a single snap. And Eckler, once again, continued to shoulder the bulk of the load and had a big game. Let's start there because until we figure that out, or at least try to suss that out, we can't do much.
Yeah, I know some people are saying it might be 50-50. They might work Gordon back in. If this is a close game, I think, and also it depends what this defensive line looks like. If Derek Wolfe is out again, it could be very easy for this running game for the Chargers, like we saw last week. So I would give Gordon right now. I'm going to be optimistic and give him around 70% of the load, giving the remainder of that on the ground, maybe 25% to Eckler, and then if you think Justin Jackson has like a touch. But it doesn't mean that I don't like Eckler. Like I do think he's going to be involved in the receiving game still. I think they're going to line him up, get creative, have them both on the field. So it doesn't mean that 25% of the backfield touches doesn't mean just 25% snaps. Like I think there's a real chance Eckler still plays 35, 40% snaps. And that's upside for a guy who probably won't have any ownership in tournaments because everybody will just think his value is completely crushed. It's really crushed at that price point, I would say. But I do think there's some upside there. But overall, it's kind of a spot where I'm not going to jump on it. A lot of times if you jump on it early, you can win a lot of money and just take advantage of it. I just don't feel comfortable going either way because it can go to a 50-50 split. I'm projecting it as a majority of the touches for Melvin Gordon right now.
Okay. Thoughts on Keenan Allen here? Most heavily targeted receiver in the league. 33% target share through the first 4 weeks. He's been spectacular.
Yeah, so I went back and I looked more into the guy a lot of people are going to say he's going to face this weekend, Chris Harris Jr. And, man, Harris Jr. has just been fantastic this year. And it's not against just nobodies. It's against Devontae Adams, Allen Robinson, DJ Shark, probably the one who's the more nobody there. But he's only given up 8 catches on 12 targets for 96 yards, and that's total through those matchups. So it's a tough spot for me. Keenan Allen's going to be heavily targeted. He is a crisp route runner right there with Devontae Adams as some of the best in the league. But Harris is shadowing. He's moving into the slot. He did it with Allen Robinson. He did it with Devontae Adams. Like, he's following you all the way across the field. So it's a spot where if I think Julio and DeAndre Hopkins, who are the other high-priced wide receivers, are in good spots and a little bit more expensive, not by much, I'm just going to get there. It feels hard to say that after Keenan Allen pretty much lays a dud last week because of the game flow. But this is a really scary matchup. Definitely don't want to get there for me in cash. And in tournaments, it's just because of how much better those environments are for team stacking, game stacking. I might not have a lot of Keenan Allen, which is scary, but the matchup for me at least warrants it a little bit.
All right. Denver side of the ball, Joe Flacco, he has a couple games with multiple passing touchdowns. Clearly his best game last week came against Jacksonville, and the one they should have won, but the defense couldn't hold it together on that final Jaguars drive. We had 303 at 3 touchdowns and interception. Now he's got the Chargers, Casey Hayward, and just in general, a very difficult secondary to go up against. Say what you will, but you got Desmond King, Casey Hayward. This could be a very tough assignment, but he's also cheap. So is there anything about him being discounted that puts him on your radar, or are we looking elsewhere?
You're talking Emmanuel Sanders, right?
Sorry, Joe Flacco, and of course the
Oh,
rest
Flacco.
of this team. But
Yeah.
I'm
Okay.
saying Flacco, very cheap, tough matchup for
Yeah.
him. You know, when you look at this, if you hate Flacco, it's going to be hard to be in love with any of the other guys. Not necessarily not want to play them, but let's start with the quarterback position and work our way to
Yeah.
these receivers.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know he's cheap. I know he had a good week last week, which is probably like an outlier at the end of the year. I'm just not going to get to Flacco this week. So last week, I mean, Jalen Ramsey, I think, was a big piece of why he had success. It takes a really stout, best in the league, in my opinion, cornerback off the field. You get AJ Boye, who's also good, but it just makes it easier for a guy like Sanders to go for 100 yards against your third string cornerback where it's not the same case with the Chargers. Yes, they're depleted in the secondary. No Phillips, no Derwin James, but Casey Hayward is a better cornerback, in my opinion, than AJ Boye, and he'll be on Cortland Sutton. You have Desmond King, who's just absolute shutdown. He's going to absolutely just take Deshaun Hamilton's lunch this weekend in the slot. And then, yeah, I do think the one piece of this game would be Emmanuel Sanders for me. He's going to face a undrafted free agent who's had trouble so far in coverage this year, and Brandon Faison, the cornerback 2 on the outside. Lots of trouble. That's the weak point of this defense. The safeties are depleted, but he's been terrible. So Emmanuel Sanders is the one piece from Denver I take. I do like Cortland Sutton moving forward, but it's a scary matchup against Casey Hayward. Sanders, his upside gets lost a little bit because he does move into the slot on maybe 30% of his routes. And if he goes there, you'll probably have a good chance of Desmond King seeing him. But when he's on the outside, and if they were smart, they would scheme him to stay on the outside against Faison. I'll have interest in Sanders at only 5,100.
Okay. Any interest in Phillip Lindsay?
No, it's just too close of a split right now relative to other backs. One guy I will say is Noah Fant, the rookie tight end. He's been steadily improving every single week. Somebody I'm watching closely, TJ Hawkinson, the guy getting all the hype in terms of rookies, but he's looked good. And if there was a reason that Tyler Eifert was going to be extremely highly owned because he's facing Carolina or the Cardinals this week, Arizona, I was just going to pivot to Fant in some lineups, but there's no ownership coming in on Eifert, as there probably shouldn't be. So that's all I'll really note there. Slight interest in Sanders and even outside interest, really more so for season-long people in Noah Fant.
Okay. Yeah, Noah Fant, 28 routes run last week, 22 in week 3, in week 2, 34, and weeks 1, we saw 29. So kind of all over the map there. From the standpoint of like what type of workload is he seeing, his snap counts have been pretty consistent, and then targets, it seems like, he's settled into, anything can change, but like four targets per game. I do like what I've seen from him, though. I just like to see a little bit more work in the passing game. And the reason I say that is at his price, I might just get up to Eifert in a better matchup. All right, last one here, Sal. We got about 5 minutes to close this out, and I think we'll have plenty of time. Hey, and if you guys enjoy the show, you want to help support us at Awesemo and help us keep this channel running and give you free content every day, it's greatly appreciated if you hit that thumbs up button, like the video, subscribe, and hit the notification bell as well. Good things will happen to you if you do that, so I've heard. You might even win a tournament, and all because you like the video at Awesemo. So, look, it's a win-win, right?
Yeah,
all right, Sal, Green Bay and Dallas, looking like Michael Gallup could play.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. He said it's more mental right now. He's got to get back out onto the field in some like legit full pad competition. And then on the other side, Devontae Adams, who knows what's going on with him right now. He was not participating on Wednesday. I know you mentioned, and I said the same, that I don't expect him to play. But we'll start with the Dallas side of the ball. At home against Green Bay, coming off a loss to the Saints where they scored, 10 points? It wasn't pretty. I don't want to say it exposed them, but when Dak Prescott isn't getting production from Ezekiel Elliott from his run game, he is certainly hamstrung and neutered to an extent. But you got a 46.5 over under here, tied for the second highest on the slate. Cowboys 25 implied total, 21.5 for Green Bay. That seems a little strange to me, even if Adams is out. But here they are, 3.5-point favorites at home.
Yeah, on the Dallas side, I mean, there's just so much incentive right now for the Cowboys to just run Zeke into the ground in this game and see
especially after what Howard did and Sanders did last week.
Yeah, they did that last week. Dalvin Cook did it week 2, and everybody for the most part in the Packers defense, their secondary has been stout. And it was like, okay, this is Dalvin Cook. He's really good. But no, last week they just got their lunch taken again. So this run defense does not look great at all. And look, every single incentive, literally, like you have Tyron Smith out, who people are going to say, oh, that should knock down Zeke on your interest board. And it doesn't for me. He's a much better pass blocking lineman, and their better run protecting linemen are still going to be in there. Like this is still a top 10 offensive line, even without him. The matchup is just too good. And then also you're incentivized because you're a home favorite and you want to keep Aaron Rodgers off the field, even whatever he's working with on the other side. So Zeke is the main cowboy I want. I'm not sold on Gallup yet. I see like in the past 24 hours, lots of positives coming in, but he did say earlier this morning that he has yet to full out sprint, and he can't full out sprint. He can cut, but he can't sprint. So, yeah. I mean, if you're going to stick Kevin King on him for the Packers, who's actually a quality cornerback when healthy, just battled injuries the first 2 years of his career, it's going to be a tough matchup for a guy who can't sprint by you. And you're telling people that. So maybe it's just lying and get by him. But I don't have much interest in Gallup. Amari Cooper is going to face Jair Alexander, who's number 2 in coverage this year for Pro Football Focus. Just been shutting everybody down. Doesn't let Nelson Aguilar catch a ball. Emmanuel Sanders having a strong start to the year, only lets him catch like 2 balls. So Jair Alexander looks really good. I think this is an interesting game because usually you think this is an awesome game, last one, stack it, but there's not much because it seems like a very obvious just run the ball with Zeke as much as you can against a defense in Green Bay that not only struggles on the ground against running backs, but they're really getting bashed in the receiving game, 3rd most receptions to the running back so far this year. So it's really just Zeke for me. Love seeing the usage last week. No Tony Pollard once the games actually started to matter.
So we close it out with the question. Can we both assume that Adams won't play?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to play.
Okay. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, where do you have him at? We got about a minute left. Go ahead, because I think that's the biggest piece here. And, of course, Allison and Jimmy Graham. I'll let you close us out, Sal.
Yeah, so MVS is de facto number 1. I think he sees a bump. He probably sees somewhere between 8 and 10 targets. There's upside here. The cornerbacks are really fast for these Cowboys, but they're down their top 2 safeties. Kevon Frazier went on IR. They already don't have Xavier Woods for another month or 2 weeks at best. So the secondary in the back half is really favorable. It's just a matter of, like, who the hell is Aaron Rodgers going to throw to? I'm a Packers fan, and my biggest concern all along was if Devontae Adams go down, there's nothing. Like, MVS is, on most teams, a wide receiver 3 or 4. So I really don't have much upside there in him this week. Obviously, the price point's nice. The targets will be there, so you can get there if you want. I personally don't love it. And the main spot that I'm going to in the receiving game is Jimmy Graham. I'm going to have probably too much Jimmy Graham this week. He ran 60 routes last week in an inflated game. He saw 4 red zone targets, and most of those were when Adams was out. So the guy that is, even if you don't look at last week, going to be the most trusted by Aaron Rodgers this week is Jimmy Graham. What they have out there is MVS, Geronimo Allison, who's been dropping balls and not getting separation, Jake Kumru, who's a preseason superstar, and then Alan Lazard and Darius Shepard. Jimmy Graham is the most trusted player that Aaron Rodgers will be throwing the ball to this week. I would expect that they scheme more running back Aaron Jones into the passing game. They should. But it's mainly Jimmy Graham. Jones on the ground should see a ton of snaps. I don't expect Dexter Williams to really take from his workload. 84% snaps last week. I expect him to be right around 75, 80% again. So Aaron Jones is an interesting play. He's a good favorable price point. But this Dallas defense the last 3 weeks only giving up around 60 yards per game on the ground. So for the most part, a little bit of MVS, mainly going to get to Jimmy Graham. And I feel really good about that spot right now.
There it is. That'll do it. 12 up, 12 down, baby. Hour and a half, not too bad. But, of course, we've got other games happening this week, which is why Alex Baker and Ben Rasa, Awesome-O, and the Rasa, Jazz Raz, got coming up right now, full-out breakdown for tonight's showdown slate, where monster prizes are on the line, of course, across all of the major DFS sites. They got you coming up. Go to youtube.com/Awesome-O. You'll see it right there live on our homepage. Check them out. Look, you got your lunch break. You're hanging around. You're not working and doing anything today. You got to check this out and help support their show. Make it a good one. And we will see you back here tomorrow on the NFL Strategy Show. Thanks as always for watching.